Well, folks, here we are. It's 2025, and the unimaginable has become reality. Donald J. Trump is back in the White House, this time with fewer restraints, a rubber stamp Republican Congress, and a Supreme Court that has just handed him the golden ticket of presidential immunity. And if you thought Trump 1.0 was chaotic, just take a look at what's happened in the first weeks of Trump the sequel. Mass ICE raids terrorizing immigrant communities, a full-scale rollback of diversity programs, a sweeping crackdown on reproductive rights, and yes, his Department of Justice already laying the groundwork for retribution against his political enemies. Oh, and don't forget the cabinet, a variety of rogues, a gallery of MAGA's most extreme, including Kash Patel at the FBI, Pete Hegseth, who was confirmed for Secretary of Defense, Kristi Noem, who has been confirmed for Homeland Security. It's the America First fever dream on steroids. Today, Robert Kennedy will be sitting before a Senate confirmation hearing. And yet, through it all, there's one group that refuses to stand down, the Lincoln Project, the very organization that made it its mission in 2020 and 2024 to rip the mask off Trumpism and lay bare its threat to democracy. But how do you fight back when the Supreme Court has just told the president he's essentially above the law? How do you convince the millions of Americans who, despite everything they've seen, once again voted against their own interests? And let's be honest, what mistakes did the Democratic Party make in 2024 that has led us to this moment today? Joining me today is a man who's been at the front lines of this fight, Mr. Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. We're going to break down the state of resistance in Trump's America, how the Lincoln Project plans to counter this authoritarian turn, and whether the political establishment is truly ready for the battle ahead. Rick, thanks for being part of the Political Mic.
Hey, Mike, great to be back with you.
So one of the ads that stood out the most to me in 2024 was the ad entitled Aftermath by the Lincoln Project that basically predicted what a Trump second term would look like. I want to go ahead and play that for the viewers at this time.
November 5th, 2024. Donald Trump defeats divided and dispirited Democratic campaign. On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Unfortunately, he keeps his promises. Trump seizes control of a divided government, signing hundreds of executive orders implementing Project 2025. Trump replaces over 50,000 civil servants with hardline MAGA loyalists. The federal oath of office now requires declaring loyalty to the president, not the Constitution. Protected by the Supreme Court's grant of total immunity for official acts, Donald Trump orders the Department of Justice to arrest members of the January 6th Commission, current and former DOJ employees, and political opponents for treason, election interference, and conspiracy. He declares it to be an official act. Trump ends birthright citizenship by executive order and turns millions of American-born citizens into illegal aliens overnight. Mass deportations begin. Hundreds of thousands, including legal U.S. residents and American citizens, are imprisoned in newly built camps. Protests erupt. Trump addresses the nation from the Oval Office, invoking the Insurrection Act and declaring the protesters a danger to American sovereignty. He orders the National Guard to use deadly force to suppress the protests. In the wake of the bloody violence, Trump declares nationwide martial law, awarding himself new powers under the freshly signed American Sovereignty Protection Order, which defines protest of immigration policies as non-protected speech and a threat to national security. Governors in New York, California, Illinois, and elsewhere declare their opposition, promising to refuse compliance in their states. Trump orders their arrests. Trump pardons every January 6th attacker, including those who assaulted the police, and in a White House ceremony issues a new presidential medal honoring them. Many are given jobs in his administration. The Department of Education is renamed the Department of American Values and mandates a nationwide Christian nationalist curriculum for all schools receiving federal aid. Trump, joined by Speaker Mike Johnson and evangelical leaders, announces that the Department of Health and Human Services has reclassified mifepristone, making it illegal to distribute or prescribe, as well as new HHS regulations that make IVF treatments impossible to legally administer. Trump reverses one campaign promise by declaring a national abortion ban by executive order. Challenges to his authority are rejected by the Supreme Court, which has seen new appointments from Trump after it was expanded to 12 justices. He signs an executive order removing abortion records from HIPAA privacy regulations and announces a new federal data sharing program so states can monitor women's periods. Thousands are detained while crossing state lines under suspicion of seeking an abortion. Trump's acting Secretary of Defense, a disgraced ex-general, fires over 400 generals and admirals, leaving the military leaderless. Other Trump appointees purge the ranks of the CIA, FBI, and Department of Justice. By executive order, Trump withdraws the United States from NATO and ends Pentagon cooperation with Ukraine. Russian tanks enter Kyiv. Vladimir Zelensky is killed. It is announced that Trump will run for a third term, claiming he was unfairly cheated in the 2020 election. His Supreme Court ultimately agrees with this interpretation, paving the way for Trump's 2028 re-election. If you hear all this and believe it isn't possible, then ask yourself, what did you believe was impossible just 8 years ago? This isn't a fantasy. It's Trump's plan, and he's counting on you to believe it couldn't happen.
So, Rick, you obviously had a crystal ball somewhere at the Lincoln Project that saw some of the things that we've been seeing. I mean, we've seen the ICE raids. We've seen him taking action to take a hatchet to the 14th Amendment with the executive order that seems to end birthright citizenship. What is the Lincoln Project strategy in the upcoming days and years? Is it to simply point out and say, I told you so? Or is there another strategy to still fight back here?
Look, it would be easy to just say, I told you so. I help lead an organization full of people who have been telling people exactly what's going to happen since the moment he took office. The first time. Our objective is not just to say to people, nah, we told you so. Our objective is to drive down Trump's popularity numbers, to show the harm he is doing to America, the harm his appointments will do to America, the harm his policies will do to America, and to push down that number to the point where it's in the mid 30s again. Donald Trump's natural watermark for his approval ratings is somewhere in the mid to high 30s, 36, 37, 38, somewhere in that zone. A little lower sometimes, a little higher sometimes. Right now, it was at 47 when he came into office. It's now at 45. It is dropping quickly because the impact of these executive orders, of these raids, of these policies he's trying to implement, the impact of Project 2025, which was the story all along, is starting to really make people angry. They're not happy about it. Even his supporters are learning very quickly that he wants to cut things like veterans benefits. He wants to cut things like disability. He wants to cut things that they take rightly are part of. Look, a lot of MAGA voters are veterans, and this idea that you're going to now reduce veterans' health care, reduce veterans' benefits, reduce the aid to veterans' families is to them outrageous, and rightly so. So what we want to do is drive his numbers down because, look, by the end of this year, we will be in the 2026 election cycle. We need to push Donald Trump's approval rating down as far as humanly possible because that does two things. In the Senate, that makes it less likely that they will cooperate with him. The less popular he is, the less cooperation he'll get. In the House, we need to set the political predicates so that we have a very, very good year for the Democrats in 2018. Not because the Lincoln Project is progressive or because we're liberal or because we're Democrats, but because the House today in the Republican caucus is not conservative. It is MAGA. And they have a very dark vision of this country that we believe is incredibly dangerous to rights, liberties, freedoms, the rule of law, and to economic justice and economic liberty in the country, because they are setting out to do one big thing this year. All the noise you're hearing, in a way, is a distraction from the Elon Mark Zuckerberg tax cut that they want to pass in the House. That's really their main objective, is to pass this big mega tax cut. Okay, I get it. That is their payoff to the people that supported and endorsed Donald Trump from the financial side, from the financial sector, from the tech sector, et cetera. That's their gimme. But let me tell you, we are in a fight right now that I actually feel better about than I did on Inauguration Day. They are already stretching the limits. And he's hurting not only the people he hates, but the people who love him. He's hurting his own base. This idea we're going to do tariffs that is going to end up not making the country great again, but tariffs that are going to end up costing you more at Walmart. That's not what the MAGA voters signed up for. They did not sign up for Donald Trump being front and center on invading Greenland or Panama or annexing Canada. No one wants that. That's not, and his agenda is, in the polling numbers we're seeing and that we're getting back, his agenda is remarkably unpopular. I mean, Mike, remarkably unpopular. About 24% in our survey of voters approved of releasing any of the January 6th criminals. None of our people in our survey, and it was literally like 98-2 on releasing violent members of the January 6th criminal class. And the fact that Trump has released people who attacked cops, who attacked the Capitol, who tried to kill Mike Pence, who went into the Capitol with violence and anger and a terroristic intent, those folks being released has been a very bad mark for Trump, even from a lot of his own people. There's a great understanding growing, I think, now in even in the MAGA elite class that Trump's impulsiveness and the unintended consequences of what he's doing will eventually blow back on them. And I think that's the case also.
And part of the Lincoln Project's mission seems to be to counter the avalanche of misinformation that is now going to be unleashed now that you have Zuckerberg removing the restrictions from Facebook to allow unchecked lies to go, free, free on Facebook, and all this cozying up to Trump, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, contributing to his inauguration celebration ceremonies, whether it's ABC capitulating and deciding it's better to pay $15 million than to go through a legal battle against Trump for his suit for defamation. And there seems to be a capitulation, widespread with the media. I don't know if it's a coping mechanism or a survival tactic, but there's this kind of, bowing down. We've been put on alert for years that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the country. And now there seems to be an attempt to somewhat soften that image or kind of back off a little bit, take off, to no longer play with, to no longer, take it to him to the chin. And I'm wondering how the Lincoln Project is going to operate in an environment where everyone else seems to be a little bit, now tepid around Donald Trump because of possibly his authority to use the FCC to go after them. I don't know what the rationale is.
Mike, for better or worse, we are not exactly people who walk away from a fight. And there are plenty of arguments that we'd all be better off walking away from the fight. Plenty of people have said over and over again, like, just stop doing this and he'll forgive you. And if you just say one nice thing about him, things will be okay. And you can go back to being a Republican consultant again and make all this money. I'm like, none of us here signed up for that. We signed up to do something for the country. We signed up to fight the fight against this guy. And it wasn't because we didn't like Donald Trump as a person. It wasn't because we didn't like Donald Trump as a candidate. It's because the things he represents are anathema to America. They're anathema to our representative system of democracy. They're anathema to this republic. And our organization has fought this fight now for 5 years. We helped win in 2020. We won 17 races in 2022. We moved our numbers this year. We actually, in our statistical modeling and our math, we moved the Republicans we had to move. We couldn't overcome Donald Trump stealing away a percentage of young African-American men, a percentage of young Hispanic men, and a much larger percentage of 18 to 40-year-old white men. Those three groups, Harris needed to pull some numbers out of those groups she didn't get. And God bless her, she ran a great campaign, but not great enough to touch those numbers. And unfortunately, I think that we're on the pro-democracy side, on the pro rule of law side, there is a sense of panic and anger and fear and unhappiness, and I get it. Losing sucks. Losing is terrible. Losing has put this country in a dangerous position. But just because you lose an election doesn't mean you stop the fight. Just because if you say for several years in a row, Donald Trump is a danger to democracy, he's a danger to America, he will put us all in great peril at home and in the world, and he gets reelected, you can't morally just say, okay, I quit, fuck it, I'm done. You have to, Alexei Navalny, who Vladimir Putin killed for his opposition to Putin, has a line that sticks with me every single day. I think about it every day I wake up. You are not allowed to give up. You are not allowed to give up. And as much as at the age of 62, I would love to go and write more books and raise my granddaughter and fly my airplane and go out and have a decent life again where I don't have to think about Trump every day. I have a responsibility. My organization and our team has a responsibility that we've taken up, and we're not going to walk away from it.
And a lot of what you're going to have to deal with is the fighting of misinformation, like I alluded to earlier. But
sure.
the challenge about misinformation is that people want to believe the lie. They want to believe that Trump was better for the economy. No objective data supported that.
Right.
The last 3 years of Obama's presidency caused the last 3 months of Obama's presidency caused the first 3 months of Trump's presidency to pale in comparison when you look at the unemployment numbers, job growth, when you look at the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, in every way you could possibly measure the economy, Trump paled in comparison to his predecessor and his successor.
That's right.
And people still believe this nonsense that Donald Trump was better for my wallet. I understand the threat to democracy. I understand the importance of Ukraine as an ally, but at the end of the day, the price of eggs is higher than it's ever been before. That was the rationale. And you even heard a lot of Republicans say, well, I wouldn't invite the guy to dinner, but he's pretty dang good on the economy, and that's where I'm going to vote. Now, how does the Lincoln Project fight against this narrative that has been so baked in to the electorate, where people don't even have statistics to prove or point their arguments? They're just accepting this as truth because they've heard it so many times before. And the Democrats, they had a good record. They had, unemployment, record unemployment, consecutive months,
right.
Lowest crime rate in 50 years. They had legislation they could actually point to prove that they've delivered tangible results, whether it be lowering the price of prescription drugs, delivering on infrastructure, allowing veterans to get the care they need with the PACT Act. And yet that didn't resonate and hit home with people.
There is a devoted, dedicated storytelling machine on the MAGA right, on the populist right. And that machine tells a story to its people every day. It is, you are the ones who are oppressed. Black and brown people and gay people are the ones who are hurting you. Communism is coming unless you do what we tell you to do. They hate your family. They hate your values. They hate your religion. They hate your job. They hate you. That storytelling machine produces every day what I call a catalog of imaginary demons, whether it's Antifa or Black Lives Matter or socialism or vaccines, any of these things. They all come together in the minds of the crazies that are told every day. And Fox has this profoundly powerful normative effect on those voters, and the rest of the social media messaging machine. It's, of course, Elon owning Twitter now and using it with a thumb on the scale to alter the dialogue and alter the conversation with hundreds of millions of people. Those normative forces are something that does not exist on the left or in the Democratic Party or in the center even. So fighting that disinformation machine, fighting that messaging is a central mission. If Democrats don't understand that mission, then they need to go to people who understand that mission. When you grow up in Republican politics, as I and my colleagues did, from the very first day, you learn two rules: stay on message and just win. If you have a problem with the first message, refer to the second message. If you have a problem with the second message, refer to the first message. Stay on target on your message and just win. Democrats want to talk about issues. Republicans want to talk about emotions. The heart beats the head every single time in this game. The heart beats the head over and over and over and over and over again. And the heart and the gut work from fear, work from anger, work from racial and personal and social animus and anxiety. And Democrats have got to learn this lesson. They have got to learn how to fight this way. It is deeply, deeply disappointing to watch Democrats who are very smart people fall once again into the trap of chasing every rabbit Trump throws out there. This is a simple fight right now. Donald Trump and his appointees are hurting you and your family. That's the only message. They're bad for you. They're bad for your family. They're bad for America. That's the only message. But Democrats want to drill down and to fight about the Gulf of America or climate or climate BS that he's talking about with turning the water off or on. Yes, those are all silly, funny things. Mm-hmm. But the importance is to have the fight on the things that will change the minds and hearts and votes of Americans. So that means you got to talk about the harm that is being done to them. You got to go to talk to MAGA voters and say, your grandmother depends on Medicare. You voted for Trump, and now he's going to. Your husband or your brother or your father was a veteran, and Trump's going to screw him over by reducing his benefits, undoing the PACT Act, which veterans love because they get the treatment. They finally get the treatment they deserve on some very serious matters. All these things, you've got to go talk to people about what actually is harming them about the way Trump is behaving. You got to show them the damage that he is doing to them. And you got to ask them, like, okay, did you vote for this? Mm-hmm. Did you vote to cut disability? Because a lot of MAGA folks are on disability. Did you vote to give Elon Musk a tax cut and you get screwed with a tax increase the way the tax bill is currently constructed? Did you want to end school lunch programs for your kids? Because you know what? It ain't all of them, but a lot of MAGA voters have kids on school lunch programs too, just like everybody else. Did you want to stop cancer research? Because everybody gets cancer, whether they're right, left, center, or indifferent. Yeah. Everybody gets hurt by the things he's doing right now. And framing this as the harm he is doing to America and Americans is a vital, vital, vital element of pushing back on this moment that we're in with Trump.
And a part of me believes that, Democrats forgot how desperate they wanted to win in 2020. I mean, there's a reason why Biden was, polling at the top for so many months in that primary. It wasn't because, he was the sexiest candidate out there. It was because people thought this was the best shot we have to peel away votes in Minnesota, to peel away votes in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Arizona. And they were correct. And that's why, they didn't go with their heart with Bernie, but they went with their head with Biden. But in 2024, there was, after that first debate, it seemed as if, instead of selling the agenda and focusing less on the candidate, we started to just try to rationalize and say, well, who's the best messenger here? How can we get a primary here? Some pundits say, well, it's Biden's fault because he didn't drop out earlier enough to have a robust primary. Then some people say, well, no, it's not that. It's the fact that he should have not run at all for re-election. And what's missing is the focus that should have been spent on agenda-focused campaigning. And that's why I believe AOC came out on her Instagram Live and was telling her followers, if you think there's consensus around one particular candidate or not, you're sadly mistaken. Let's focus on actually selling the record of the past 4 years. John Fetterman of Pennsylvania made the case similar to AOC, saying that we need to stop focusing on trying to replace the candidate at this point, focus on the agenda. Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed saying enough is enough. Focus on the economics, focus on, how our agenda is actually better for Americans' wallets than the alternative. And for whatever reason, we didn't take their advice, and it seemed to have cost us. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you believe, as many others do, that it was a candidate quality issue rather than a focusing on the agenda issue?
Look, I have some tough love for my Democratic friends. A lot of the agenda is not popular in America. Not a lot of the agenda, it does not work for you in most parts of America. That's just some real talk. I don't mean that as a conservative or as an ideologue. I mean that as a political operator. And I mean that as somebody, when I was a Republican who specialized in taking away Democrats and moving them into the Republican column. The cultural message that killed the Democrats this year, and it is one that you don't have to like it or approve of it. You can acknowledge its cruelty and its shittiness. The trans message, which went largely unresponded to, splashed and overcame almost every other thing that Democrats were saying with young black men, young Hispanic men, and white guys 18 to 40. Because they heard that trans message. They didn't like it. They didn't like, they're uncomfortable with it. Whether that's a good or bad thing, it's a political reality. The Democrats did not understand there are sometimes things that shift in the culture that they cannot deal with, that they don't understand. I will be very blunt about this. You know who buys more guns now as a percentage than ever before? African-American women, Hispanic women. And the message on gun control does not fit with everybody in the country. It works on the coasts, but it is something that has broken the Democratic ability to campaign in about 30 states where gun control is unpopular. No matter what you think about it on paper when they do a national poll and all that stuff, it doesn't work. I want the Democrats to understand, like, don't do things that that don't work. Do things that work. Do things that bridge to people where they live. You know, climate change is a major issue, and I'm not dismissing it as a major issue. It's a real thing. Working class voters don't give a fuck. Okay. They give zero fucks. They give less than zero fucks. A guy who should be a Democratic voter who has to go out and put $6 or $5 gas in his gas tank to go to the job site is pissed off. He doesn't care about climate change. He wants cheap gas so he can do his job and pay for his family to survive. These things come across to too many Americans as academic, as liberal indulgences, and they're not as liberal as the Democrats would like them to be. You can't bring people you can't bring people over the line if there are cultural things shifting underneath your feet that you don't recognize or work around. There were plenty of ways Democrats could have done much better on acknowledging inflation and the cost of things in the economy. They almost never tried, from Harris on down, almost never tried to blame Trump for the economic problem of inflation. They defended Biden sort of half-assedly. That was something that they should have been pounding the shit out of him every day on. Donald Trump raised your prices. Donald Trump raised gas prices. Donald Trump hit it over and over again. But instead it comes out like, here's our policy paper on how Biden's fighting inflation. All fine and good, and he was fighting inflation, but that politically didn't seal the deal. And this is center-right country, and the Democrats have let themselves be suckered into this game with the Republicans over and over again, where the Republicans take them to the cleaners, and they shouldn't be able to on dumb cultural issues. You know, the idea of the trans thing, which was popping up in every one of the spending reports that we were watching. We kept seeing the Republicans spending money all over the place, not just at the presidential race, but in state house races, state Senate races. I'm not going to let trans athletes compete against your daughter. I'm not going to let men in women's bathrooms. Now, you can talk that through all you want, but I know one thing about Republicans. They don't spend money stupidly in campaigns. They target, and if they know something's working, they flood the zone with money. They flooded the zone with money. The Democrats, we're the only group that produced an ad saying that the policy of transgender surgery for prisoners was a policy that happened under Trump.
Exactly.
The Democrats wouldn't touch it because they were afraid of offending their own base. And it just, if you live that way, if you're always looking over your shoulder, you're going to allow bad guys to find an issue and drive it home.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, they were campaigning as if Donald Trump was still Donald Trump in 2016, as if he didn't have a record. You know, I even
Right.
had folks on the show say, "Well, you're dealing with someone who's not a politician, dude. He was running, he was president.
He's been a politician for a fucking decade.
So this idea that we're running against someone who's straight out of The Apprentice or straight out of Trump Tower, and he's
Right.
That to me was baffling because in addition to what you were saying with the messaging, what I said, what is a opportunity economy? I mean, not to throw any shade at anyone, but I was like, come out with a price reduction plan and call what people are going through Trumpflation.
Right.
Put it squarely at the foot of who's to blame.
100%.
And
100%.
We're explaining away. We're on offense, and when you're explaining while people are hurting, that, of course, that's a recipe for disaster. History proves. But what's interesting is that for those who are like, well, you're getting too extreme. Donald Trump is not going to be a dictator. We heard that before. It's rhetoric. How's
that working out now?
Exactly. I mean, Andy Ogles of Tennessee, the fifth congressional district from Tennessee, proposed legislation that would essentially allow Donald Trump to run for a third term.
Yeah.
And they're serious about this. And Donald Trump, of course, is not going to turn that down. I mean, imagine if we're in a situation like 2000 and there's no clear winner on the night of the election, and Donald Trump says, "Well, for the good of the country, I'll stay where I am until this is figured out. And if it's indefinite, the time period is indefinite, then so be it. I'll want to continue to carry out my duties." I mean, this is the reality that we're in because a lot of people, that you alluded to, the Latino, the blacks, did not take seriously. And as it pertains to DEI, white women are the main benefactors,
Absolutely,
beneficiaries, I should say, of DEI. At a record rate. And a lot of people were like, that DEI is not really addressing systemic racism. Well, it wasn't designed to address systemic racism. It's designed to be a start, not a finish. And even going back to this idea that we're a meritocracy, which is, Donald Trump, that was like one of the themes of his inauguration, that we're going to go back to we're going to be a merit-based country. And he's saying that with people who represent, the top 1% of America, himself included, did not get where he is because of his merit, and many
fucking Nepo baby. Come on.
So the hypocrisy would be laughable if it wasn't chilling. And I want to get your thoughts on how we move forward in 2026 and 2028, because it seems as if even now people are drawing the wrong conclusions about why they lost the election. How does the Lincoln Project bring it home to people that, look, you're going to have to make this thing tangible, real, and personal for people, and not everyone's going to be moved by the abortion story. Not everyone's going to be moved by
I will tell you this. Our survey, which is gigantic, we run a constant longitudinal voter and consumer data based thing that is amazing, showed that abortion was strong. Every piece of survey work in the country showed abortion was strong. Trump's own pollster said abortion was hurting him. And at the end of the day, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, we're still short about 9.5 to 12.5 million white women who should have voted for Kamala Harris, who stayed home. The issues of the issues in the Democratic portfolio that give them strength center on the economy. The issues in the Democratic elite class, gun control, climate change, abortion, they are not where the majority of the country is. And I'm not making a qualitative judgment on those issues at all. I'm just saying, if you are going to go fight a battle, fight on the strong terrain for you, fight on the high ground, not on things that are distinctly at variance with where the country is. I think a Democratic Party that takes the strong side of the argument on the economy, the strong side of the argument on crime and criminal justice matters, it doesn't mean you're abandoning your values. It means you're showing that the illusion that the Republicans have written into the narrative about the Democratic Party is wrong. I think Harris was a terrific campaigner. I think Harris had a terrific message. I think that the problem of the broader apparatus of the Democratic consulting class, Future Forwards, had $1 billion. Had $1 billion. I don't know where that moved the numbers. I spent $20 million. I know exactly how many people I moved and exactly how many people we were able to contact and communicate with and persuade. And we did. We actually got more Republican voters to vote for Harris than voted for Joe Biden. Not by a ton, not by a ton, but a measurable number. The Democratic apparatus needs a wake-up call. Their consulting class needs a wake-up call.
Yeah.
They need a hard slap across the face and put their head in ice water for a while and wake up clear, because this is not the things they're doing are not working. Yeah. You can't test everything into oblivion and hope that somehow you can focus group and add to the point where no one is offended.
Right.
Sometimes you have to move fast, be loud, break things. And again, Donald Trump stole a lot of Democratic voters on the basis of the belief that he'd be better for them on the economy and that he understood better who they were.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, all the talk about taking Greenland and now all of that is a distraction from the fact that he has no plan on the economy. And while he's distracting people, it's music to Putin's ears, because now we can't even wag our finger at them for their annexation dreams when they want to rebuild the former Soviet Union.
That is correct. And so, and my friend Julia Davis, who runs the Russian Media Monitor, she talks about how delighted they are that we're talking about seizing other countries, taking over Greenland, taking over Canada. The Russians are thrilled by this. This is a fantastic message for them to say, see, we're just doing what Trump would do.
Exactly.
So,
and many people even criticize Harris for her appearance on The View when co-host Sunny Hostin asked, was there anything you would have done differently, basically, than President Biden? And she said, I can't think of anything. And I said, honestly, let's just live in let's go back in time to October and say she did say I would break on him with the economy or immigration. The A1 page of the New York Times would be Vice President clashes with Biden on XYZ. How would that have helped? In fact, that would have fueled the narrative, just like Nixon enjoyed the confusion.
It was a no-win question for her.
Right.
I mean, honest answer, it was a no-win. But it wasn't. The answer. I think you could have somewhat threaded the needle.
Mm-hmm.
I admire Joe Biden. Joe Biden is given me more wisdom and inspiration than I could tell you. But we are obviously now in a different world, and we have to run things in a way that reflects the realities of ongoing inflation and crises that in just 4 years, Joe hasn't been able to fully, bring under control. I will always think of him, as a wise leader and a good friend, but I'm going to have my own policies. I'm going to move forward on things. I will put my own mark on on the way the government is run, on what we're going to do. I mean, you can wake me up out of a dead sleep and I can answer that question, but it wasn't a question that wasn't an easy question. And no matter what happened, it would be difficult.
Yeah. And my point was, Trump would have, seized on the opportunity. Democrats are not even on the same page, right? Which already was the picture that people were getting. But before I let you go, Rick, we have these confirmation hearings going on. J.D. Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote for Pete Hegseth after McConnell, Murkowski, and Collins decided to defect on that. Mitch McConnell, of all people, breaking ranks is something that we didn't expect to see, since he didn't even want to vote to convict Trump in 2021 for January 6th. What does this tell you about the state of the Republican Party under Trump 2.0, as we're preparing to see Kennedy being grilled today, and then Tulsi Gabbard afterwards?
Look, RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel are three of the most dangerous, destabilizing, incompetent, and unethical people that any president in my lifetime has nominated for any position. It is absolutely imperative that the Senate if it's going to maintain its role as one of the co-equal branches of government, reject all three of these candidates. I believe that Kennedy and Gabbard are both on very thin ice. I don't know about Patel because they're going to put the full court press on that. They want him as their hammer against everybody else. But I think we're going to have a big fight on that. I think the Senate has given him Pete Hegseth. I don't know how much more they're going to give him, how many more freebies he's going to get out of this whole thing.
Well, Rick, this was a fascinating and wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for
anytime, Mike. Love being on with you, and let's talk again soon.
Sounds good. Take care. With that being said, that's going to conclude today's episode of the Political Mike Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in.
All right. Thanks.
Hi, it's Mike Taylor, the host of the Political Mike Podcast. If you like what you heard tonight, I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to ask you to please follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music. You can also follow along and keep up with the conversation through our Telegram channel. Follow us on Twitter at @ThePollyMike, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much, and no matter what part of the political spectrum that you fall on, I want to encourage you to stay engaged, stay a part of the conversation, and stay informed. Thank you.